Okay, good morning. It is 10 o'clock, January 25th, 2016, and I call the Potter County Commission Court to order. This morning we have Claire Calvin from St. Andrew's Episcopal Church giving the invocation today, so Claire will come up. Claire, would you stand up and make a pledge?
As we begin this meeting with grace, we remember with gratitude this court's privilege and responsibility in providing for our common well-being through careful governance of sometimes invisible and yet always deeply vital aspects of daily life. We pray the wise Spirit who enlivens us to renew in the members of this court and the visitors to this court the courage, the clarity, and the humility to accomplish its work with integrity and care, contributing to the neighborliness and flourishing of all its citizens.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Okay. Number one is a recognition of minutes from January 11, 2016 Potter County Commissioners Court meeting. So any questions or comments? If there are none, it's so recognized. Number two is vouchers, to consider and act upon the approval of the payment of vouchers processed by the county auditor's office for the period of January 6, 2016 through January 10, 2016. Check numbers 166616 through 166979 and wire transfers 661 through 665 in the amount of $2,753,487.78.
Move that we approve the vouchers as presented.
I have a motion, second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hands. 5-0. Number three is a recognition of bond. You recognize the executed bond of the purchasing agent, Vicki Shelton, in accordance with local government code 262.011. Any questions on this? Any discussion? If not, so recognized. Number four, treasurer's report. You recognize monthly treasurer's report. It's Leanne. We have both a monthly report and a quarterly report today, right?
Exactly. Good morning. I'll start out with, there were some changes to the quarterly report. We included Texas Class this quarter since we started that in December as a new investment. And that begins on page 18 through 21. Once we get through a 3-month period, that will be one will cover the part for the time that we've invested. Okay, then our rates this morning, tax pool is 28 and taxable prime is 41. Texas Class is 45. And our A and B checking is 31. So things have been slowly, progressively climbing, and that's been a blessing. Our totals this morning, Emerald National Bank checking is $3,974,280.64. Tax pool is $398,659.15. Prime, tax pool prime is $5,031,822.33. Texas Class is $10,002,792.90, and then we still have our Cedars at $7 million. So our grand total cash as of this morning in our general fund is $26,407,555.02. And And then I'd ask Sherry if she would do a percentage for us this morning. Let's talk about where we are with our tax dollars.
Right now, as of Friday's collections, we're at 58%. I anticipate we're probably going to collect another 25 to 30% next week.
How does this, that compare to this time last year? I know there was
A little above.
a little above.
Really?
Basically, it's just the top 10.
Yeah, we're waiting on most of the top 10 taxpayers to pay, which a couple of those won't be until next week because they go by the postmark.
We paid mine this morning, so it should be up to about 79%.
Appreciate that. You were one of those that made up that line out there.
Okay, thank you so much. So recognized. Insurance reports, recognized insurance report. Is there anything significant, okay? No, nothing unusual. Okay. So recognized. Any questions or any comment? Okay. Sherry, you're up again. Yeah, would you consider an act upon tax refunds for overpayment of taxes? This is the usual thing, right?
Well, on these, they try to pay us 2 of Randall County's accounts, and then they try to pay us 3 accounts that we were told to send us.
Remind me not to use them ever. Okay. Is there any questions?
I make a motion that we approve the tax refunds for overpayment as presented.
Okay.
A motion and a second, all in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you, thank you. Number 7, we're gonna skip over that, come back to it at 11 o'clock when it's time to do the bonds on that. Number 8, contract collection services, to consider and act upon approving the contract with Purdue, Brandon, Gilbert, Collins, and Mott for collection of delinquent court fines, fees, and court costs. Today we have a Bill here who's gonna come and talk to us. And Kim, I guess if Kim wants to. Oh, okay.
Do we need to wait till he comes back, or how would you like to present that, Judge?
Should we wait? Scott, can you cover it until he gets back?
Long story short, I'm Bill Pankin, associate with Purdue Brandon Law Firm. We have 12 offices across the state, but it all started right here in Amarillo. Been around for about 38 years. We collect the county's taxes, as well as AISD and municipalities as well. But we're here on a fine and fee contract, which is my understanding, we already have in place, but we're renewing the contract as it is today. And we met with Mr. Camp and Ms. Murguia and the county auditor back in our office, I think a month and a half ago, to discuss our collection services. So if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them, but other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Any major changes, Bill, or pretty much?
I don't believe so, Mr. Kelly.
And Judge Laura may have something to add to the process because really, and Dave could certainly speak to this as well, this project really is probably adding additional services. And so I'll speak to it, but Laura, you may want to add to it because I definitely don't want to misstate. But what we were looking at and where this initiative came from is our current collection efforts. And any opportunity after a certain threshold to then possibly outsource that because of staffing constraints, obviously. So instead of the answer kind of always being at budget time, we need new staff, how do we continue to leverage an existing partnership? So prior to that, JP1 and JP3 had already been sending over referrals, if you will, on the accounts. And part of this process is to include County Court at Law number 1, County Court at Law number 2, JP number 2, and JP number 4 are still in discussions on JP number 4. But it really, I think, is hopefully helping us to position with looking at some of our district cases. None of the district cases will be going over as a part of this agreement. So just to be, kind of clear on that. But what we've done from the departmental perspective is look at the cases that are really just sitting there. So we tend to look obviously for opportunity to continue to collect that. So phase 1 is maybe the category I might put what this agreement is going to include is roughly about 300 cases out there and roughly about 130,000 that's sitting in this to be collected bucket. But the bigger conversation is really around our district cases and what I might put in a category of phase 2 and phase 3, which will take some time for us to scrub those cases and make sure they're referral ready. And I'll look at Laura to give me another word if I'm saying that incorrect. But there's roughly 3,000 cases out there and roughly $4 million. So as a court, we may need to come back and support Laura and her collection team, whether that is looking at temp services to help scrub those cases and get them ready to get over. But we obviously want to make sure that those cases are ready and appropriate to be referred, instead of just shooting from the hip and referring them and having incorrect balances through that process. But the initiative also involved Julie and her team and Roland and IT. So there's been a lot of diligence about trying to get ready to refer additional cases. So I did want to thank them, because this will require some changes on Julie's side as well, to really help be a part of making that change. And Dave, I'm not sure if I didn't cover something that you would like to cover.
No, I think the contract's fine.
Laura, certainly, you're good.
And if I may add just 2 points to that, as a general matter, our costs, our services are completely cost neutral to the county. We have a collection fee that's allowed by the Code of Criminal Procedure that we add onto the ticket, so no money comes out of pocket to the county. So that's certainly a benefit that we think we provide to the county. For JP1 and JP3, our collection rates have been 38 and 41%. Industry average is about 30%. We strive for 35. So we're very happy with our collection rates for the 2 JPs that we're doing right now. And we're confident that whatever gets turned over, whatever the county decides, we can continue those positive collections.
Well, what is 2 and 4 doing right now?
2 is going with the process, they will be moving over. And 4, we're still in discussion with Judge Jones. So I don't want to speak for him directly, but that is part of what's still being vetted as the process. But I do have to applaud really Laura, because this discussion of possibly outsourcing has gone on over a year and a half, maybe at this point a year. It's changed. And one of the things we always talk about during budget cycle is, the answer can't always be new positions. We have to start thinking about things a little differently. And so I think there's obviously been some bumps in processes and trying to figure out, and that is probably still to come. But I do have to applaud her for willing to take this on and this change on, and how to really leverage partnership and do right by the county and the taxpayer dollars.
With that in mind, if this is a financial neutral or dollar neutral situation, why don't we send all our collections that way?
That's a good question, and honestly, the district judges at this point have not wanted to send that over. Some of it is really confident that the cases are ready to be, have been scrubbed. If they're indigent category, we want to make sure we're not charging fees we shouldn't be charging them. So we're trying to do our internal homework before referring that out. But once that homework is done, absolutely, we would be approaching the district judges to continue that conversation. This is a very fair question, Commissioner.
I've always thought these people did a great job, and appreciate what they've done for the county, and I move that we approve this new contract. Second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. All against, all abstaining. Thank you very much. Okay, number 9, elections. To recognize the Potter County, that Potter County has received successful status from the state of Texas for the vote centers. Yay.
Yay. We received a letter saying that we have achieved successful status as a vote center county in the state of Texas. And so we just wanted to let everybody know that at this point, we get to continue.
So we now have a city with the same voting practices in both counties.
That is correct, and that is awesome for everybody who lives here.
Okay, and then B, to recognize Glenn Huntley and Christy Bench for achieving the designation of registered election officials, REOs, by the Texas Election Center. And we'll need these little certificates right
Yeah,
here.
basically the elections officials or elections in Texas, they wanted to raise the standard for election officials, make it more of a profession instead of something that's just handed down from one person there to the next. And so they have formalized a training, and we completed that training, and so we have little pins that say we're REOs.
Sounds like a lot saying that.
I know, it does. There should be a song with that or something.
Then C, to recognize the polling locations for the March 1 joint primary election.
Yes, and so just as soon as we get the vote centers in place, we find out that one of our vote centers decided to close its doors. And we were informed of that last Wednesday. That was the T-to-Go location. Commissioner Kelly, the day after you and I had discussed it, as a matter of fact. And really, when we were looking at the ideal location there, we were really wanting kind of the Sunset Center area, but Sunset Center never responded. On Thursday, we went and visited with Grace Community Church. It is a gorgeous facility, so you'll notice that there is a change, and Grace Community Church has agreed to be our location to replace T-to-Go. It is located at Plains and Western, and we're just really excited to have them on board.
Well, then, as it relates more to the November election, I know the hours is something that we'll continue to talk about, is that correct? Okay.
That is correct. And so, yeah, the hours for the November election, some of that will be set in code. You know, that we will be told by the Secretary of State the minimum of what we have to do. But in terms of what we had discussed earlier with early voting, as I get to the corner of the budget year, we'll be looking at additional hours that second week of early voting, no matter what the Secretary of State says. Okay?
Okay, and then D is to inform the court of the state of Texas, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services grant opportunity that would improve the ADA accessibility for voters of Wesley Community Center.
Yes, there are some leftover grant funds that originated in 2006, and the state of Texas did not expend them all. They tried again in 2009, still didn't get them all away, so they tried again in 2012, still didn't get them all away, so they're saying this is the last and final, and it's the first time we had seen it, but it's really there for the purpose of improving accessibility or basically any gap we have. And of all of our vote center sites, the one that is not as good as far as ADA is concerned as we'd like it to be is the Wesley Community Center. And it meets the minimum standard, but not really what we wanted there. So I met with some contractors last week, and we will be submitting in hopes that we will get some money to change some things on their sidewalk, change some ramping, add some additional signs. The estimate that I got was $2,640. So that's what we're looking at. But it would be paid through the state of Texas from a federal grant from Health and Human Services.
What's the timeline, Melinda, when you might hear back, do you know?
I don't know. We have until the end of this week to complete the survey with the state of Texas. If you had to complete the survey in order to be eligible for the grant. So we have submitted the survey. All we know is we're in that list. They gave us a list of counties that had previously used this grant, and out of the 250 some odd counties in Texas, there were only about 20 names on the list. So most of the counties did not look at it in 6, 9, 12. So I don't have any idea how much money is in that pool, and I don't have any idea how many other counties will be looking at it, but if past history shows, I'm going to say that we might stand a good chance.
Well, and Judge, I have visited with the executive director there at the Wesley, Liz Duscoin, and that's also a senior center. And so obviously that's something that we can obtain as a county that would go a long way, not only as a voting location, but certainly to help those seniors, especially during inclement weather,
Yes.
get in and out of the building.
And we actually do vote in the senior center there. So, but at the time we were checking out the polls, that was the one thing we adapt things there. We throw roads over level places. On election day, they are compliant. In talking to Wesley, they said they were grandfathered. That's the reason that they have never done this work, but we'd like to make it the way it should be.
Do we have any minimum length of time that they need to commit to us as a vote center?
We
If
asked
they
them.
walk away next week after we fix it?
The ones that committed the first time, we asked them to commit for a 3-year period. And as far as I know, this is the only one that is not. But these things can happen. Life has changed.
You also pick stocks?
Thankfully, no. Nor do I pick candidates, so there you go.
Thank you. Number 10, we were originally going to continue this, but seems that we do have an agreement with them now, Dave. Right?
Yes, we've got, and I have a draft, but we drafted this up. This is, really different, and Lisa's Dawson's here, probably better speak to this than me, but we had our services as a psychiatrist until recently, and she has left. And so, the Sheriff's Department has negotiated a deal with the Panhandle Centers to provide those kind of services. And so we just took the existing contract we had, psychiatric services, and revised it, and then sent it. Lisa talked to the centers, and they kind of tweaked the language a little bit. And that draft you have there is the language that they agreed on. So, as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. I don't know about what budgeting, that sort of thing. As I say, Lisa can probably speak to that. That's the agreement we're asking you.
So, Lisa, I work with you every Monday afternoon at your facility. And you and I discussed this at length one day about, number one, we're very sorry that Dr. O is gone. Number two, you're thinking about going to telemeds. And I said that there's nothing more bothersome than having a person with mental illness talk to a TV. And you said that that would be okay, that they'd be okay with that. Is this what this is talking about, having the telemeds?
Yes, ma'am, there'd be a service with telemed service, and it would be, TPC would be the provider for us, and they would provide the psychiatric services for us.
So I would echo the judge's concern. I'd like to know, why you think that might be an appropriate approach versus an actual, I think ideal is actually to have someone there on site. I'm looking at you and the sheriff, because one of you may add to this too, but, I would imagine part of the diagnostic, and I'm not in that field at all, but I would imagine part of the diagnostic is body language and those type of things. And moving to a remote access, is that what we were hoping to accomplish when we brought the initiative of adding psychiatric services in that line item?
Actually, what we're looking at is, we got lucky with Dr. O. We had somebody that wanted to come in,
Okay,
and for the price that we could afford, and I don't think we'll ever be able to replace that for that price. With the telemeds and with TPC, they'll be able to contract with someone, so even though the doctor is through TPC, they may be in Midland, but it's all done by video, and so they're watching them just as the patient is watching the doctor. So the services will always be there, and I think we won't have that break like we have now, that we're having, where we don't have anything.
So walk me through that process, on that, how the telemed process works, in comparison with what we had. The process of the telemed, walk me through that process from identifying the patient to the delivering the meds.
TPC has provided a worker for us in the jail. And so between their worker and our Sharon Powell, which is also a reviewer, they will review the inmates and they will advise the doctor of the patients that are in custody that need to be seen. They will do an evaluation of them. Once the evaluation is done, then it is presented to the doctor, so the doctor has the diagnosis and everything before them. Then they're able to come on screen, like the sheriff says, they're not in MLO. The services are throughout the state of Texas, and TPC just governs that and works that part of us. They'll be able to go on screen, and it has been done in the past. This is the way that it was done when the sheriff first, enacted this and had his own screener out there, is that we've always done through his own meds. And it's just that, it's a two-way television where the officer and the patient is there along with the counselors in the jail, and then the doctor's on the other end, and they evaluate them and talk with the inmate.
Have we ever visited with Texas Tech University Health Science Center about a cooperative deal with their
I haven't with sheriff's office.
residents?
So we've always gone through TPC because they are the provider of mental health here in the park.
Is there ever a chance that we could ever have a full-time psychiatrist over here? I see a huge need.
You know, we had Dr. Earl,
Yeah,
and,
she was just part-time though, I mean,
Right.
what would it cost?
We-
What would it,
well, probably double that, what we had with her, she was part-time. Not only double the part-time work, but then you'd have to put her in as full-time, so, I mean, you're talking, well, I think
it's just hard to find psychiatrists that wanna work here.
Right. Even TPC was having the same issue in finding doctors
I know.
to come back in, and that's one of the things that the telemeds are able to go out and find throughout the state.
Sure, how are other counties, I think of, Randall or Lubbock or Midland, that we tend to look at things even from a budget perspective, how are they handling this in their jails?
TPC, they're doing this.
They're all doing telemed, everyone?
Well, Randall is, for sure, but they have the same process where they have somebody from TPC within their jail, and they do the telemeds as well.
What about a jail that might be more comparable to our jail? And I think about number of inmates, I think about criteria of why they're in the jail. I'm sure I'm not calling it the right thing, Sheriff, but what jail or what county would you compare us to? Because I'd be interested to know how they're handling it in terms of the need of our inmates.
Well, and there again, you look at demographics as well, not only just the size of the jails and stuff. I have not spoken with anybody like Woodstock or anything like that, so something we could look into. I mean, if you get into, which is not even close to ours, but you look at Harris County, which has their own psychiatric department and medical division and everything. I mean, that's a whole nother section that they have just for their jails. So, as far as ones that are closer to us, I mean, like I said, we really look at Randall and see the same thing. They deal with a lot of the same type of people that we're dealing with here. Cause they get the class C misdemeanors, so if it's just if it's just somebody walking across the street or whatever, they get them, but if it's a higher offense, then we may get them. So they deal with the same kind of people the same way.
On a daily average, how many people are we dealing with out there today?
As far as with the
Then we want to go into telemeds, how many people would be?
Dr. Ohiku was only out there for an average of 4 hours a week and seeing our 4 patients each week, basically, 4 to 5. At any given time, I'm running a report now that provides the sheriff with patients that we have in custody that we have seen a need for psychiatric, and we're up in the 60s, 70s at times.
Per day or per week?
Per day. They're there forever. You know, I mean, it takes the process of trying to go through mental health court, trying to get some amount that way, but if they're a felon, then they're there for quite some time. So, I mean, on any given time, we're probably looking at between 60 and 75 inmates that would need services.
And so how long on an average does, I'll just call it a diagnostic, just because I'm not sure what it's called, there's an assessment maybe. How long on an average does an assessment maybe take for one inmate? And where my question is going is, we will be paying via this agreement $185 per hour. How long does maybe an assessment cost?
Dr. Ohiku, we were paying $200 an hour, and typically a face-to-face, it was lengthy. With telemeds, whenever we've done it in the past, we'll probably see 20 minutes to 25 minutes per patient. So on average, we'll probably see more patients with telemeds than we did with Dr. Ohiku.
And you trust it, you trust the telemed,
Yes, ma'am.
and you do, Sheriff.
And those are trained, validated clinicians that are working and recommending them.
So what happens after the diagnostic? And so let's say they do meet a criteria of whatever diagnosis that they then provide. And they have writing privileges to write a script, and does that just get shipped over, or do they verbally call that in? I saw some language in here about using the pharmacy to get them on appropriate meds. Is that kind of the goal, to stabilize while they're in the jail?
Yes.
Okay.
And the big challenge, and the judge can attest to this, the big challenge is we can get them medicated while they're in the jail and we can get them stabilized. But it's once they get out, is where we have the issue, and they may or may not continue with TPC, but there's no forced hand there, which, I have to give kudos to the mental health board. We're holding rural North accountable, and it's working. I mean, what do you say, 50-50?
We've had 17 cases, and we've had about 4 that have actually done okay. I had 2 of them come in Friday, so I could pat them on the back because they're doing great. Because they're on their meds, they're seeing their counselor, they're finding a place to live, they're doing so good. And to see the look on their face from the day I saw them the first time till I saw them Friday was 100% better.
And that's, you know, and getting them stabilized in the jail is the key for us. It's less chances of having to deal with them physically or anything like that, not only for our officers, but for them as well. If it's something that really becomes an issue, we can also use the court, or use the TBC, but also use the diagnosis to get them to the state hospital. Make sure it's something that needs to move further than what we can handle. Like I said, we're not designed as a mental health facility, and we're dealing more and more with that on a daily basis. And not only here, but it really is all over the country.
So the councils that you work with, Judge, what do they provide? How that, is that a part of the deal?
They get a list, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mitchell, you guys get a list every day of the misdemeanors in jail that have mental health issues. They pick the ones that they think that might go through this program. Every Monday afternoon, we staff them. We have anywhere from, we look at 10 to 15 new patients. We pick the ones that we think will be able to go through the program. They bring them before me. We talk to them. They have an attorney. We have the state's attorney. We go through the whole gamut of questions, and then I choose whether or not to let them go or stay.
And for ones that are not, should take, go through the program,
They stay in jail. Because some of them literally do better in jail than they would do on the outside. Found that out the hard way.
Sheriff, so what's happening to these inmates now that Dr. O is gone and this contract is not in place? What are we doing with them today?
Well, we're still being able to staff them through TPC.
Okay.
And hopefully get them on meds. It takes a little longer process to get them through that, diagnosis part of it. But we're still taking care of it. We just don't have somebody on staff.
With this telemed, this is already happening with TPC, or someone's coming on site for TPC?
Well, we're just using our mental health counselors that they have.
Okay.
With us.
Okay. And are there any technology changes, anything that's needed for this telemed? No, any special, you have it?
So when if we approve this and I sign this, when will it start?
I will have to get back to TPC and see when. I believe we had talked about services, for our jail will be on Thursday mornings, so hopefully we'll be able to pick up Thursday morning.
And Dave, I noticed language in here, that either party may terminate this agreement within 60 days written notice, because I do think Commissioner Church brought up a valid point, whether it's a collaboration with Texas Tech, and or looking at what other counties are doing, because I think the ideal is face-to-face. Then we'll always run the line of what's the budget expense to offset that. But I do think that's important to continue that conversation, especially with the amount of inmates you're talking about, 60 to 75 per day. I just don't want to lose sight of that. But that's, I was looking particularly for termination language, not that we would terminate without a due process, but.
Like I said, the biggest thing is finding somebody that wants to do that part-time. Like Dr. O works full-time and still changes the hours. Finding somebody that's willing to do that is pretty hard. If you've got somebody that's retired that wants to, just kind of do something on the side, but it's still trying to find that right person. I mean, we can look at it, Texas Tech, I'm not opposed to that, and we'll sure go to that, we call around and check with some of the agencies that are close to our size and see what they're doing, but a lot of them do the telephone. A lot of them. Regardless of whether it's TPC or it's still I think most of them are all gone to some kind of panel center's name, it's still mental health and mental rehabilitation, it's all changed throughout the state, but most of them are doing the telephone.
Well, and I've seen some really creative collaborations even on the education sector that, I mean, I think all industries are dealing with retirement and what's the next kind of feed of generation that's gonna come in. I've seen some really interesting collaboration with students that are maybe like the last year or 2 years of their program of study. And whether that's a scholarship and them committing to 3 years on the job or whatever that is, to help get them past that threshold and make sure that you've got someone to staff it. So, you know, I think anything we can entertain is probably warranted.
Okay, thank you.
I move we approve the contract with Texas Panhandle Centers to provide psychiatric services at the detention center.
I have a motion and a second.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. 5-0. Thank you very much. Number 11, eminent domain authority report. To approve the eminent domain authority report to be filed in Texas Comptroller pursuant to Texas Government Code, Chapter 2206, Subchapter B. Dave.
The legislature in 2011 passed a law asking counties, in fact requiring counties to post a report listing in case they wanted to do condemnation, you know, taking private property for public use and, you know, fair market value for it. And there's various statutes that authorize that for not only counties, different state agencies. So in order, frankly, for reasons that are not entirely clear to me, they decided we're to have everybody report and tell the public what possible statutes they might be using for condemnation. Well, that could be any of them. There's an exhibit attached to this memo that has the number of the ones that would possibly affect the county. And so the last time, 2011, when we submitted this report, it's a very simple report. You just tell what authority you're contemplating about using and whether you've done any condemnation in the past year. And so most everybody has just been posting a list of all the possible statutes with authority with their report, and that's what we did in 2011. So we've got to do this again, and so I can't give you a copy of the report because we do it online, and they don't, for some reason, the comptroller's office did not provide. You know, there's no hard copy I can show you. It's a very simple, this memo tells you the information we're supposed to have. So all we're asking is that we've got to do this by the 1st. So all we're asking for you to go ahead and post this, we'll post it online, and we intend to include the statutes that we included the last time, which were essentially those. We have not done a condemnation the past year. Eminent domain, and to my knowledge, the last time we've done one has been at least 15 years ago. So I don't anticipate, and that's because most of, whenever we use eminent domain, that's usually through TxDOT for road purposes, and they usually do it, and then we reimburse. It's done as a partnership thing, so we haven't had to do it very much up here. But just in case, we will do what the legislature has. This time they put a fine on it. If you don't do it by a certain time, by February 1st, you're subject to a fine. So we'll do it. It'll take us maybe 5 minutes to post it with your permission. And this gives you all the information that I have about it at this point.
So Dave, who officially posts this on behalf of the county? Is it you?
We have our office in that. We did the last time.
Okay. And then in terms of the deadline, and now that there are fines for missing the deadline, how do we keep track of that just so we don't miss that from year to year?
What everybody has been doing is, and I don't even know if we have to post it again annually, but we'll just set up a ticker on the calendar. It's like any other business do regularly. That shouldn't be too difficult. And a couple of counties have already complied with this. Just with nothing to print out, they print out. They're just doing a screen print confirmation showing that they complied. So it's hopefully the legislature will work it so it's a little bit more user friendly next week.
Make a motion that we approve eminent domain authority report that Mr. Kent be able to post.
Second, just a quick discussion. I just had one follow-up question. Dave, so you're saying we list everything that's on this handout for the lack of we don't want to miss something, so you just include everything, even if we're not pursuing eminent domain in any of these categories.
Right. Otherwise you can't. If you don't list it on the, otherwise we don't list one, we decide we need to use it, we're not allowed to do that. So as a precaution, so I mean, if I may inject an editorial comment, it doesn't make any sense, does it, you know, because, it's just busy work, quite frankly. Because everybody's posted everything, so there's not really any kind of notice to the public. It's frankly kind of a useless procedure, but, so we're required to do it or face it.
Well, I'm taken by the one that says intracoastal canals, that
That's
really
right, you
reflects
don't
what
wanna
we
forget
do.
that, you never know.
It'll be a long one.
I just think in terms of the report itself, I understand what you're saying, the exercise in the process, but if we're listing everything that we're not really entertaining from eminent domain, I mean, that seems a little
The
contrary.
alternative is to risk putting something we might need, not being able to do it. So as a precaution, before everything, which is what everybody's been doing.
With everyone.
I'll vote for this,
That's kind of the recommendation from both TAG and the urban counties, is that exactly what you do.
I'll vote for this motion, but, I hope we never use it. So,
Well, we haven't in 15 years, so maybe.
so maybe another 15 years.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed?
I think we should be listing a report with what we accurately and appropriately expect in the next year.
And what would that be, Commissioner?
Well, and I think as a strategic effort, if we don't have something scoped out for the next year in terms of eminent domain, then we don't list it. And if we do, I would like to think we have at least a year's notice to however we're gonna overlay that power, if you will.
I'm not trying to argue with you, but
Yeah.
on the other hand, I certainly, as your counsel, don't want to guess wrong and have y'all not able to do it. So as a safety precaution, we're gonna post it.
Okay, number 12, Road and Bridge, policy of culverts. To consider and act upon requiring landowners to contact the Road and Bridge Department prior to installation of driveways and or culverts before the county will be responsible for expenses to have them repaired, replaced due to drainage issues. How are you getting some
I'm just adding that to the county road specs so that, with all these new developments, we won't run into any more issues. They don't just throw a pipe in the ground or what have you.
So you've been having some problems with this stuff?
Yeah,
Obviously.
and they just throw them in there and they cover them with concrete. If it backs up, then we have to cut them out. And then they'll expect us to replace it with concrete, which we won't, because, they should have contacted us. And, Floyd Hudson, the developer out there, he put it in his contract every time he sells a lot, that they contact Road and Bridge about the driveways. And all we gotta do is just go out there and check what size it is and where it goes, but they haven't been.
But they're not doing it.
Yeah.
So how are you gonna enforce this?
Well, if we have an issue with the drainage and we go out there and we didn't put it in, we're just gonna dig it out and clean it out right, and then they'll have to pay us or pay somebody else.
So is there a process, Sebastian, that's a documented process, so if a landowner does something and that you at least give them notice that you are
Well-
not included?
Yeah, if we see a culvert that's not installed properly or the wrong size or a plastic culvert, something that blocks the ditch, then we just go out there and tell them that, you know, they need to fix it or else we're gonna have to fix it ourselves, and then they'll be responsible for replacing it or what have you.
I think the commissioner's point, I agree that you want something on paper that.
Well, yeah, I would just like to, I was imagining, really just a documented process of this is what would happen, and from a landowner's perspective, I think the ideal is when they're in the development phase, which I'm hearing you're not getting in that conversation, sometimes you see it after the fact.
Yeah.
And probably that's the majority of the time you see it after the fact, but I was imagining a process that the court has adopted to kind of give you, not that you need that, I'm looking at David, to give you permission to have that conversation with the landowner, because where the landowner is gonna come is to commissioners.
I think that's a good point. I mean, I think we ought to, I don't think it needs to be a complicated process, but I think, like, if we had, like, I'd like to know if we just had like a sheet of information paper, you know, goes online, it would say, here are the standards for.
Well, yeah, we
And
have
I was wondering
out,
if
but there's nothing in there stating.
So maybe adding to
That's
the
what
road
I'm-
specs.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to add.
Okay.
Is add the specs as far as that goes, because there's nothing in there. Because, the reason this came out, there's a guy on, Eastern and the Loop out there, he's gonna build a business park or something, but he was, getting the road specs from us, and then, I just told him to make sure he gets with us about the culverts, because there was nothing in there.
So that makes sense, that it
Yeah,
would
and
fall
I
in the
need
road
something
specs.
in there so that he'll contact us and we can get the drainage right.
So Dave, would you help draft that language to amend?
My concern would be that if somebody does something improper, we can go out and fix it, then we need to be charging somebody for that. And I like to have that in the language too.
Do we, and I can't remember, do we install though, I mean, they obviously pay for the culvert, but we have been in the past installing like free and for some kind of minimal charge.
Yeah,
Isn't that right?
we charge $500. They buy the culvert, and then we concrete test and install it, cover it with caliche, and charge them $500. And that's cheap compared to contractor. They usually get,
And other counties.
yeah, and they usually don't like that, and they'll check around and they'll come back, because it's way cheaper than what anybody else.
Be glad to let you go.
I let them shop around, but they always come back.
Okay, I think the motion is that. Okay, is it appropriate to pass until we have the language of what's gonna be in the road policy? Dave?
Yes, absolutely.
So we'll bring that back in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Is that enough time?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it's good.
Okay, number 13, Amarillo Tiers. Number 1, board report on Tiers Board recent activity. Commissioner Church.
Yes, I serve on the Tiers number 1 board, and we met on January 14th. And the purpose of the meeting was a request from local government corporation for a loan on the parking lot. LGC cannot use bond funds to construct the retail facility on the bottom floor of the parking lot. And so, they did come to Tiers to ask us about loaning them money in order to do that. Back when Tiers was formed in 2006, I believe, they set up parameters of what their purpose was. Initially, in that purpose statement, it was to support and help fund the catalyst projects downtown. And so with that in mind, the Tiers board had set aside $2.7 million for those projects in the past, and that money had been sitting in our accounts. They need an additional $1,687,000 to complete what they need to do for the construction of the retail facility, for a total of $4,387,000 for that downstairs construction. So this was discussed. They asked for $1,687,000 loan for 20 years, and the Tiers board moved to grant that money. These monies will be used for the construction of, like I said, of the retail area, and also for some streetscapes as well. So that's what those funds will be used for. I might say that after we talked about this, and this kind of completes our responsibility with the catalyst projects, we're going to take another look at some of the criteria that we've used to make grants or refunds of that Tiers money. So I see in the next month or so, we'll be taking a look at how much we're gonna give in the future and for how many years. So that's my report.
Okay. Commissioner, I have a follow-up question. Is that the loan kind of appropriate use of loaning to another arm of a government entity? And I'm thinking through Tiers and the infrastructure and the mission, and I definitely have my Powder County hat in terms of us paying really double of any other government entity, and that was just in our vouchers. We paid $354,639 just this last year once we got everything back from the appraisal district. So we pay double of anybody else that goes into the pot.
You know what it is, don't you?
Sure, yes, but I'm talking in terms of, I feel like we have a voice, obviously, in the conversation,
Right.
but a bigger part of that, is that appropriate use of the funds?
Legally, yes.
But I think some,
Did you vote in favor?
Yes, I did.
and I think some of the consternation that I think Commissioner was indicating is that they want to look at that, comparing that to see if we want to continue to go out there with that squiggly road, that's, to adapt, to go into that type of funding.
Well, but it's interesting that there's been several things that now want to be looked at, hence the 8-foot wall that was just passed. And everything wants to be looked at, but these are passing, and this is part of the future infrastructure. It's just, okay.
I think you ought to ask that same question to your LGC.
And that's-
They are the ones that asked for the.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because that is not, the loan is
They
not
will be
in the
paying,
agenda.
they will be paying this back over a 20-year period.
Is there interest applied to the loan?
Yes.
When does LGC meet again?
On the 5th. I think, let me double check the date here. What's the interest on it? Do you know by chance?
Possibly would have to say.
Okay, if not, that's okay, I can. February 3rd is the next time they might touch.
You know, we talk about it, they go
Well, it's passed at the city council.
Yeah, it is.
The project has now passed. I did, as a follow-up from our board, submit my comments for the process. So I did send that via email and give ideas, but the 8-foot concrete wall did pass.
2%.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, here, can I skip back to, would that give him enough time to go through the? Yeah, is he here? Okay, can you get him? Okay. It's close to 11 o'clock and the bonds are getting, they're coming in, so we're gonna get Mark here. Go back to number 7 now. You wanna do that while we're waiting? Okay. Number 14, Salary Grievance Committee, to consider an act on the drawing of 9 members and 9 alternates for the Salary Grievance Committee for 2016, and recognize those drawn to serve.
Always funny that we probably. How many do you have there?
I have 4.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay, you wanna do this first 9? Okay, call them out. Okay, so the 9 people on the Salary Grievance Committee are Edward Chavez, Dennis Leslie, Roger Compton, Trevor Cavanis, Kathy Durr, Maxine Benavides, Dana Wilburn, Teresa Medina, and Narni McMahan.
It's got here.
Okay. And then the alternates are Jay Roach, Todd Stevens, Andrea Moorhead, David Pitt, you did good. Emery A. Brewer, Lynette, Gary Elliott, and Hope Holman, is that 8? One more. Robert Durrett. Okay? Thank you. Okay. So done. Okay.
Hi,
We can go back to number 7 here, Sheriff's Administration Enforcement and Maintenance Facilities. Consider all matters incident and related to the issuance and sale of Potter County, Texas certificates of obligation, series 2016, including the adoption of an order authorizing the issuance of such certificate of obligation.
Thank you, Judge. We're not quite ready to proceed. We're receiving bids at 11 o'clock. Set up in there, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes before that. We wanted to just kind of go over a few things just to brief you. December 14th, you authorized us as Commissioners Court to proceed. What we've done since then with your staff is we went out and got a bond rating. I submitted that on your desk. The rating came in exceptional. We are AA. The highest rating that you could get possibly is AAA. AA plus is the next. The federal government is AA from Standard & Poor's. I'm sorry, the federal government's AA plus, and we're right behind that, and we cannot print and make money. So it's the rating that we really wanted to get. They break it into multiple categories. The items that we control, we came in strong budgetary performance, very strong budgetary flexibility, very strong liquidity, strong debt and contingent liability profile, and then strong institutional framework. So all the items that we control, we came in extremely strong. It's where we wanted to be. That's what you all set as priorities and how to manage and what your staff puts into place. Reserves, strong reserves, having cash, having funds available. So that part went extremely well. We put out an official statement that investors are looking at that and preparing the bids, because they said we're going to get those any minute. What we're going to do once we get the bids is check them for accuracy, come back and get it structured the way that's best for the county, and then come back and award. There's some items that we're struggling with right now because it's brand new. It's this new 1295 Texas Ethics Commission. There's not been many of these put out where they've got to immediately sign a document if they're the winning bidder prior to you all taking action. Your purchasing department, I'm sure, is aware of it. People don't know this is effective January 1st, and purchasers, people, contracting parties are all learning about it, and they're nervous about it. They don't know where it really stands. So we're going to work through that. We've got very big bidders looking at us: Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Fidelity Investments, Hilltop Security. So all of this is going on, and they should be submitting any minute. I really don't have any information. We'll need to take care of that, then come back and finish this item once that's complete.
Okay.
Assuming interest rates come in, we will be well below rates that we were projecting. You might remember me talking about how the Fed was raising interest rates. Well, we were starting to estimate higher, and we were running those numbers at 4 1/4. Well, the past couple of weeks, we've actually seen interest rates go much lower. The 10-year Treasury bond was at about a 230. 2 or 3 weeks ago, it's at a 203. So we're going to be a big beneficiary of that once we get everything finalized. Other than that, I go back to my little office and get the bids and report back when we can get them finalized.
Okay, Mark, in terms of the rating,
Yes, ma'am.
and the best category that we could have hoped for, I really feel like that's a reflection on our county auditor and her team and their fiscal stewardness as well. So I wanted to just, in terms of the rating, that's a lot of work to get there. It's a team effort.
And they do look at not only what they do, but what Commissioners Court sets up as priority. And so it is, just like you said, a team effort. If there were problems between Commissioners Court and staff, it would be reflected in the rating. So it really is a feather in everybody's involved cap, budgeting to auditing to the treasury, the whole gamut of the county.
Okay.
And I will report back as soon as I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to Number 15, Potter County Sheriff to review Tier 1 partial exemption racial profiling report. Is there anything you wanted to say, Sheriff, other than just to report here? I think we also had to review the constables who precinct 1, 2, 3, and 4, Darrell Lurch, Georgia, Scarlett, Mike Duval, Mandela Jackson. They have submitted theirs too. Is it not any questions or comment? We can go ahead and read those or recognize. Is there any? Okay, so recognized. Okay, number 17, Master Plan Sheriff Administration Office to consider and act upon a contract amendment from Architects in the amount of $10,969 for remaining services for Stage 2 selective demolition.
This is a change order, and I'm gonna let Mike Head explain the change order.
Okay.
Good morning.
What you have before you today, if you recall, once we had started this project with Architects, we brought you the big picture of the projected project cost, the grocery list cost, the architect fees. At that time, we have presented to you all of the A&E fees to carry us through the demolition of this project. When the purchasing department had presented it to court, we initiated the contract with Architects, we failed to have one item included. So the scope of services that was originally presented to you was valued at $31,340. The court approved $20,371 of that contract, leaving the request today of $10,969 that was just failed to be approved at that time. Not asking the court for any more money. Within the grocery list, I've been able to move money around on services and line items that we have not, that's not going to be needed after we finished our environmental cleanups. We do have, currently right now, we have $19,000 we can allocate for this request for additional services.
Mike, is there a reason this didn't go out for like a rebid and that we're just doing it as a change order process in terms of?
What do you mean?
Well, the demolition, from what I'm understanding, I think this is piggybacked off of item 19 was demolition of the jail itself.
This is the design. Okay, we went through the actual schematic design development, construction, demolition documents with Architects. This was the fourth element of that task that did not get approved at the time. It's actually part of Architects' original scope of work. We just failed to put it on the agenda the day that all approved the original project. This is Architects' services to prepare for the demolition. So this addendum right here will address your bidding, for which we completed, and the management of the demolition project, for which we're hoping to proceed with in 2 years.
So that was basically just a lapse of omission.
It was. We failed to put it on the agenda. We gave you all those line items of the cost, and this was part of the fees that we failed to put on there. We do have the funding for it. It was just not properly approved.
Carrie, I know I ask you this often, in terms of the dollar amount that we have spent for Architect services. Do you have the Architects services?
Yes, we spent right at $1,064,000.
$1,064,000. Thank you. Accounting is fine.
Okay, I need a motion on this, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the contract amendment from Architects in the amount of $10,969.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Thank you. Number 18, formal proposal number 1044-22 renewal. Consider an act upon renewing formal proposal number 1044-12 jail meals with 5-star correctional services for an additional year with a 1.028% increase per meal as allowed in the proposal effective February 12, 2016 through February 12. And even though it says 2107, I don't believe it's going to be here in 84 years.
I think you're right.
So it's probably 2017. Jason, would you please fix her computer so it won't make those mistakes?
That's an autocorrect.
Okay, so we need a And this is, we do business with these people for a long time, Sheriff. They still think that Sharon Page is the.
Yes, I was told from Debbie Muller, the assistant purchasing agent, that this is a standard we do every year, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you're okay.
A question in terms of the bid process though, even though it is a standard renewal, we do, often get the increases as a part of the contract. And so that's in there and certainly appropriate for them to bring it forward. But do we take this out for bid or do we just wait for the vendor to come back and say we wanna, did that process happen for this contract?
That's a good question. I asked Debbie, and I believe next year we'll be going out for bid.
This is the last of 3 years. There's a 3-year with a 2-year renewal, and this is the last year, so we will have to do the bid process.
Are you happy with them?
With them,
How long have we been with them?
since I've been here, 7 years, I don't know if it was before.
Thank you.
Okay, need a motion, please?
I make a motion that we approve formal bid number 1044-12 for jail meals with 5-Star Correctional Services for an additional year with a 1.028% increase per meal as allowed in the proposal.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. See, Number 19, demolition of Old Potter County Jail to consider and act upon awarding formal bid number 1121-16, demolition of Old Potter County Jail to the lowest and best responsive bid based off recommendations from purchasing at Commissioner's Court. Funds budgeted in 2015-2016 Sheriff's Construction Fund.
Okay, I'm gonna ask Mike Head to come up here just to reinforce some of the clarification on
Okay.
this. I actually took this, Matt Crandall, would you come up and, pass out we had some updated information that came in last Friday. We did, a prelim evaluation and, there was 2 top, awarded, or not pre-awarded bidders, Total Demolition and Grant Construction. There was, if you notice there was a salvage amount that they were, asked to disclose to us as a deduct. Total Demolition, which was the low bid to spec, actually misunderstood. There was an error, and they thought that the $35,000 would already be deducted off their base amount. They've already taken the deduct. So therefore, that changed the tabulation to if you were to change that, it would make it Grant Construction. But based on clarity from Total Demolition, they have said that they will honor their bid of $35,000 deduct, which that's what Matt Crandall, the buyer, basically says that it'll be a total of $259,975 with a savings of $6,200. So based on that information, since an invitation to bid, that Total Demolition is the recommendation, low bid to specifications.
Mike, I do have a question in terms of their substantial completion. I was surprised to see such variations from 32 days to 120 days. So where in the truth of how long will this project really take?
I feel more in line with 90 days. They've got the state notification that they have to file and fill out. That right there alone takes up 11 of those days. The one that quoted 35 days, I don't see how they could even got the work done. The duration, 2 to 3 months. People look at a project like this, well, I hope we don't snow. No, we hope it snows. Because the more moisture you have in a demolition project, it's dust control. You keep the dust from blowing all around and stuff like that. So these contractors can work any of the weather. I mean, no matter what the weather is on the demolition. The recommendation that's presented to the court today, I'm going to disagree. Michelle. I would probably do this.
And that is Total Demolition?
Yes,
Okay.
against Total Demolition. If you look at the base bid of $294,975, they filled out the bid, from what I'm understanding, of a deduct of 35,000. Okay, then they come back and say, oh, you know, that 294,000 already included the deduct. So then, out of reality, that would have made their bid $329,000. So now they're willing to come in and take off 35,000, another 35,000. Honestly, I've seen this quite a bit when bids come in. You look on there of everybody else, how their deducts come into play. You have 8,000, 8,900, all of a sudden you jump up to 35,000. Honestly, they did not check the market of the area. Still, salvage price is probably around a penny a pound. I mean, it's very low within this area. The gentleman did state, I believe to you, Matt, that they had a market for this steel that they could salvage. I just look at that's a way for a contractor to get his foot in the door with hopes to get change orders.
What are you recommending, Mike?
I'm recommending Grant Construction. I think we have what, $5,000–6,000 difference between the two bids?
6,200.
6,200. Are either one of them local, Mike?
Yeah.
Grant Construction is a local contractor. They're keeping, work locally.
Is total demolition?
West Texas, where the fertilizer plant.
What kind of days are they looking at to complete the project?
90 is what Grant.
I would like to interject that I did email late Friday Total Demolition because we did not have a formal withdrawal from Total Demolition. Their intent was that they did let us know, and we have it through email, that they did realize they did make a mistake. But I asked if, because what I needed to do as a purchasing agent is I needed a formal withdrawal in order to go to the second bidder. And they said we are absolutely honoring our bid and we're not withdrawing.
But you're saying, Mike, even though they came in as lowest bidder, to be cautious of change orders through that process? Because, I mean, in terms of the $35,000, if they're gonna honor it and they're gonna bid it, I mean, I feel like that's on them to figure out what that reduction is, but your concern is on the change orders.
Is there anybody here from Total Demolition in the audience? Anybody?
What is the duration of construction time for Grant Construction?
90 days.
If we do get a change order, we can refuse that change order because I have written documentation stating that they are honoring that bid.
Okay, is that honoring the bid based off of the deduct, that there won't be any change orders or any change orders, all of them, I messed up, we found this, we didn't know what it was.
Well, the second, I mean, those kind of change orders anybody can do. I mean, if I got in there and found there's some kind of flaw, then I could even, you know, any company here would submit a change order and say, we didn't expect this, and it was, right? I mean, that's the one kind that, you know, so I mean, that could happen to any, right?
So we could have environmental that we've said we have completed, jump up. We find something that was hidden behind the wall that was hidden on the surface.
How many times have we used Grant Construction in the past, Mike?
30-something years I've been here, every demo project we've ever done.
And they've done a good job.
I think the point that as a purchasing agent that we need to make sure that commissioners understand is this is an invitation for bid. This is not a request for proposal. So an invitation for bid is based solely on the best price and the lowest.
Do we have any information on this company?
I called references. I had one that there was, you know, a little bit of discrepancy on a change order at one time, but they said that they reviewed the change order. But I contacted Travis County. They said they would use them again. Contacted another company called Lee Lewis Construction. They said they would use them again. And so what we typically standard operations for a new vendor is you do what we call a pre-conference with the vendor. I made it very clear to them that there will not be any change orders, that they would need to honor this, and we've had that understanding in email for that. So we would refuse any change orders. But no, we don't have any experience with.
In the bid, did we ask them, or did we state that the award would go to the lowest bidder, or was there some escape clause, lowest bidder, or?
No, it would be, following Texas state law, lowest and best bid.
Lowest and best.
And
Best bid.
Invest.
They predicted to be done in 60 days. Is there, if they don't complete it in 60 days, is there a fine or?
We have liquidated damages of $500 per day.
We've learned that,
Yeah.
learned that word.
Got to be done. We have liquidated damages.
There's also the 10% cash.
Yes, we do over retainage.
And that's across all vendors.
If you got it put in writing, there's no change orders. I mean, there's always the possibility.
It's true.
Legally, where are we at on this, David?
If you don't award to them, they're the lowest bidder, and since it's a competitive bid, you've got to get notice to them, and they have a right to come to you and explain to them why they're. In other words, you pick the lowest and best, but they're not the lowest. When you go to, it's not the lowest, but the one who was the lowest would be in this case. As the, you gotta give them notice, give them a chance, so you have to come back to the next commission. You have a chance to speak to why they should give it the second time.
Let me ask the court a question. You went through and approved it based off of base bid. I mean, you just said, okay, with base bid, you don't accept any of the details. Can they do that? I'm not trying to serve you this, I'm just asking a question.
In our addenda, we had number 3 addenda, we specifically stated that there would be a deduct. I think if we would have changed that deduct, if they're not wanting to withdraw, then that would be changing their bid.
So, you agree?
Yeah, we had a long conversation about this on Friday, and they're staying pat, so to speak. They're saying, that's our bid, we made a mistake, that's our bid. And we're sticking by it, and if you award it, we've got a contract that says that we're sticking by it.
And you put it in writing, and they say there will be no change orders on the contract.
Stated in the contract.
Well, except for the unforeseen change orders, which I think are live in any project.
Yeah, I mean, I think then you get into the woods and defining what's a.
That's correct.
I think you just need to be aware, you know, if you do, if there is a change order, they're gonna have to have a good reason for it. They're still gonna have to come to the commissioner's court and justify that, and you can vote it down, I mean, as you could in any situation. That's what I'd recommend that you do, rather than right now trying to find, because we're dealing with a situation that's unknown by definition, and I don't wanna try and nail that down. I think just make it clear, you made a commitment to that. You know, they're sticking by their bid price, and you're not gonna entertain any change orders unless there's an unforeseen condition.
Because there could be a change order if you went to another vendor. I mean, you can't say there's not, there's
Yeah.
unforeseen things that.
The owner could create a change.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
And Judge, this may be more of a protocol event, but is it out of turn for us to take action on demolition of the jail before we formally take action on the issuance of the 21 million certificates of obligation?
You gotta have to, I think we had this conversation.
We've already decided we're gonna do it.
We've got the money for the demolition,
Yeah.
and that needs to be done in any event.
That needs to be done no matter
That's
what.
not
It's
waiting
not
on
gonna be
me.
fenced
That's not
in
waiting
by
on one.
the
Okay.
obligation.
Okay.
So we absolutely have to go with low bid?
No, I mean, but if you don't, you gotta have a good reason not to, and you've gotta give the low bid an opportunity to come and explain why you should change your mind.
Well, I don't know if we need a motion, maybe we can pass this until, this company comes in and talks to us next meeting. Do you wanna do that, or do we have to make a decision now?
think you gotta award it first before you do that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you'd have to make a decision to
Not give it to them.
not to get it to them, and then they can, you know, otherwise I just award it.
So you're saying the motion would have to include not awarding to the lowest bidder and then inviting them
Right.
to come speak to the court for concerns in reference to the deductions and change orders?
Yeah, and I guess my question would be, what is your reason for not going to the lowest and best bidder here?
So what I'm hearing, the recommendation from purchasing and also my legal is that we go with the lowest and best.
And again, well, I'm saying every decision's gotta be based on a reason to do that. And I'm not hearing a reason for not awarding it to the lowest and best bidder other than, well, they might come back later and ask for a change order, which we have the right to turn down. I'm not so sure that's good enough that you never worked with. I mean, if you had a company you dealt with, who you worked with because of their reputation that you're familiar with, that could be a good, you know, that, well, we worked with these guys before, we know they're going to, kind of try and do that. And we can all think of examples of companies like that. But in this situation, I don't know that you have anything other than a, you know, a caution. So in my view, I don't think I've heard articulated yet a reason not to go with the lowest and best bidder.
What is not the purchasing, there's non-responsive and there's non-responsible. And I don't think we've proved anything for being non-responsive. They clearly stated that they will be honoring their bid. And so they have not actually withdrew their bid.
Right. I make a motion to approve formal bid number 1121-16, demolition of Old Potter County Jail to the lowest and best responsive bid based on recommendations to Total Demolition Inc.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Or one? Okay. Mike, you have anything on the project?
I do have a quick question, Mike, on the extension office.
Yes, I contacted the contractors I talked to you about the other day. They are currently investigating the solvent base blues. They will not make them anymore. Everything's environmentally safe. So the contractor I've been working with is checking some other avenues for what we can do to encapsulate that concrete. Hopefully they'll have it.
Okay.
Not a cost, an answer of the correct action.
For the existing floor?
Yes.
Okay, and you said by when, I'm sorry?
Hopefully by Wednesday. I
By
talked to them this
Wednesday.
morning again, and hopefully they'll have us some direction prior to that.
Okay, and just a side note to the court, Mike is joining the extension office meeting this Thursday, and we're just gonna start having conversations on what we call the retaining wall, for lack of a better word at this point, to start looking at pricing to move the water, and the runoff, but that will all come during budget time, but just to let you know, we're trying to get ready for those conversations.
Okay, number 21, employment items to consider and act upon the following employment items from the Information Technology Office. The resignation of Philip Birkenfeld as network engineer effective January 12, 2016. And from the Road and Bridge Department, the discharge of Charles Ledbetter as equipment operator number 1, effective January 11, 2016, and transfer of Roy Sandy Burkham from maintenance tech to equipment operator 1 as a replacement for Charles Ledbetter. Do I have a motion?
We approve the employment items as presented.
Second, for quick discussion, Judge, I noticed comp time on one of the employees was 176 hours, which is past the 100-hour mark per our policy. I would like to add an agenda item for the next board to look at a report of all of the employee comp time to minimize that financial liability.
Did you get that, Shannon? Okay. Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Jail report today is 526 individuals in our jail. 87 of those are female. We have none in shoulders, correct?
That's great.
At 84.4% of those are felons, 10% are misdemeanors. And do you have any county insurance items?
I was told no.
Okay. No executive session, agenda items for next time, and be good. comp time?
Yes, please.
What about LGC?
I'll update Shannon.
Okay, so. Okay, so we wait.
Do you want to?
We do have a special meeting tonight at 5:30 for the, we're going to hear a report from the owner. That's you. Okay, good. Gary, I've never seen you before, Gary. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
From the Southern Independently, he'll be here at 5:30, so if y'all want to come back then to discuss that, or he'll report it, that's fine. We'll begin at 5:30. In the meantime, we will recess for a few minutes. If y'all want to take a bathroom break or whatever, come back and we hear from our bonds. I'm gonna read the agenda item one more time, okay? And let you respond. Sheriff Administration, Enforcement and Maintenance Facilities to consider all matters incident and related to the issuance and sale of Otter County, Texas certificates of obligation, Series 2016, including the adoption of an order authorizing the issuance of such certificates of obligation. So I understand the bonds.
Thank you. As I went through a little bit of the information right before 11 o'clock, I went in there, back to the office, and there were 5 bids. Very aggressive bids. I was very excited to be able to report. Hutchinson Shockey, well, one of the things that when you are selling this amount of bonds and you have this type of bond rating, you're going to get national interest. And that's really what we want, because it's just not only Texas purchasers. So we ended up with 5 bids. The 5 bids consisted of large syndicates, meaning many firms joined together. Hutchinson Shockey out of Chicago was the best bid. They bid at an interest rate of 2.8683. And I'm going to put all this as summary over the next few days and get it to you so the commissioners can have it and Carrie can have it. The second place bid was Bank of America Merrill Lynch at 2.87259. So less than 1 basis point difference. And third place is Hilltop Securities out of Dallas. They were also I didn't say Bank of America was out of New York. Hilltop Securities out of Dallas was third place bid at 2.8908. Fourth place bid was Robert W. Baird, I think out of Milwaukee, New Jersey. They bid 2.925. And then the fifth bid was Fidelity out of Boston, Massachusetts. And they bid 2.929. So extremely tight grouping. So the market, all of them understood the market. AA credit, great name, great financials. It's going to be right there. And all 5 are right there. The winning bid is just going to be adjustments of what they want to work for, their spread. We, as the county, don't care what they make. They are taking on risk. We care what we have to pay, and that's the 286. Now, to give you an idea of the differences between where we were projecting and what we came in.
So your projection, you're speaking to this
Yes,
document?
that was run at 4.25, 4.25%. The total principal and interest cost as of right now is $28,914,151.
Can you say that one more time?
$28,914,151. The difference between what we were using as a document in December is $3,637,195 less principal and interest payments. The average annual payment based in December, and what you're looking at, Commissioner, basically was a payment of $1,650,000 a year. We're going to end up having payments of $1,480,000 a year. $170,000 lower. And then the final interest rate was 4.25%. After we made adjustments, because we were able to put more principal up front, their final interest rate is 2.843, which is a 1.407 lower interest rates. So we had great market, interest rates coming down. Again, when we were here in December and beginning of January, the 10-year Treasury bond was pushing 2.3%, with the Fed raising rates believed to be every quarter. With all the market turmoil, that 10-year Treasury bond is down to 202, 203. So when interest rates are going down on Treasury bonds, municipal bond interest rates are coming down. So we're the beneficiary of that. We're the beneficiary of a great bond rating that we already went over. Certain investors have to categorize what they can buy into their portfolio. And some of them will say, we cannot buy below a AA rating. So having the AA rating makes our universe of purchasers larger, which drives supply and demand. More purchasers mean lower interest rates. So we're the beneficiary of a great financial history that we have in the county. Adding fund balances, strong fund balances, great rating, good staff, good leadership. We had a very good bond market. In 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 10-year Treasury bond going from 2.30 down to 2.02%. We have turmoil in the equity market. So people are afraid, they're buying bonds for safety. So all in all, we got a great result. Our final recommendation is to award to Hutchinson Shockey out of Chicago. And I'm happy to address any questions. I understand this might look a little messy, but we're receiving bids at 11 o'clock during Commissioner's Court and making adjustments on the fly. We will, in the next 3 or 4 days to you, get you a summary of everything that happened, comparing where we were, where we are, and what the final costs were.
I do have a couple of questions, if I may. So just to be clear, we're issuing certificates of obligation.
Yes.
Not bonds.
Correct.
And so I'm just, in sake for the audience, it is very different, but it has been, our financial mechanism has always been certificates of obligation. One of the questions I got asked, but I couldn't answer, was what is the difference to the taxpayer if the county would have issued bonds versus COs? And when I say difference, I'm comparing it to the 28,914,151.
The cost.
The total cost. Can you help educate me on that?
I will try. And I'll try to be, a certificate of obligation, which is what you all authorized in December to move forward, and what we would authorize if Commissioner's Court takes action, is a full faith and credit of the entire county. So it's full taxing support. It had the right of referendum that the taxpayers and voters have of the county. They can petition Commissioner's Court to take this to an election. If no petition is presented, the Commissioner's Court can take action on their own. Alternatively, a general obligation bond is also a full faith and credit. So credit-wise, there's no difference. And to answer specifically, if there's no difference in credit, then there would be no difference in interest and principal costs. However, a general obligation bond does have different costs associated with it. I believe when we were here, we talked about a bond election costing maybe $60,000 to $80,000 a year, or per election. So that is an additional cost that would not be incurred in a certificate of obligation. One of the other items that would concern me is we know we're at all-time lows, interest rate-wise. And so you would have interest rate risk going forward. Bonds, elections can be held twice a year, in May and November, and that is it. Certificates of obligation give Commissioners Court, City Councils, and issuers the ability to issue year-round. So we're seeing the interest rates come down, where the Fed is talking about raising interest rates going into this next year. And I don't know what direction interest rates are going, so I'll tell you that. But it does open up the county for interest rate risk between now and a bond election in May and selling in July or August. 8 months, 7 months, 6 months difference, we could be in a completely different interest rate environment. So those are the two real differences between a certificate of obligation and a general obligation bond. One takes an election, general obligation bond, and two, well, not different, but it's the same credit. So sold on the same day, the same credit will get the same interest rate. And I hope that answers your question. Okay.
So the next, well, maybe this is a question for the judge, because I was the nay vote, obviously, on the moving forward, and I don't know where it's appropriate, Judge, so I'll just say my piece and then let you proceed as appropriate. But obviously I have concern with the 21 million, and I just want to take this opportunity again before we officially issue them, because I feel like that's the next step. 21 million, not the need of the admin building, but they are doubling. Their current space is 20,000. This, in the current plans, is 42,000, just for the admin building, as well as some ancillary locations. And so I did visit with the judge about our approach in terms of strategic planning, and in the future, how I would advocate that we go to the market kind of knowing what we can spend, and not necessarily just going to the market with all of our needs, because our needs will always outweigh the dollar amount. And I gave this example at the last court, but I'll just share it for what it's worth. I know I'm on the last straws here, but I gave the example of the Bowie and Travis middle schools that were recently built at $16.5 million. And I've had an opportunity to tour both, and the amount of infrastructure that is in those facilities is quite glorious for our students. But at the end of the day, we're building a fair share of admin space for 21.5 million. And I know our strategic planning efforts are not done. And so I think it's really easy to have the conversation around, we're retiring debt 2 years, and then the rate may, in terms of our INS, may go down. But in all fairness to the big scope, I know we're still betting other property of the county. So I'll say my last piece on behalf of our taxpayers and let you proceed.
Hang on, just a second. Okay, so with that said, we're good with the bonds. COs. I will allow for any other business related to the bond issue. If you want to get up and speak, I will allow that. You get 2 minutes. But let me remind you, it's on the bond issue only, certificates of obligation only. And we've had 2 public meetings like we were supposed to have, and none of you showed up for those. So, Mr. Walker, I believe you raised your hand first.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. State your name and your address.
My name is Lynn Walker. I live on Milam Street here in Potter County. I appreciate the questions about certificates of obligation versus bonds, but really it's you guys making a decision versus the voters. That's what it comes down to. You've heard the overall cost. This is an enormous cost that you're about to do. And it's real clear from the meetings that I have been at, Judge, that you guys are just going to do this. This is just what you were going to do. Now, I was talking with the sheriff, and I know that you have too. There's no emergency here. And we need to be thinking really long-term. We need to be thinking about the true future of this county. Why not start working with the city in terms of some of these services and storage problems and admin problems and things to figure out a way to go forward where we can cut costs for everybody? And I still believe that there was an insufficient feasibility study done within this building to store those administrative people. We can move people around. We can do things. But we got to be thinking about the future and be thinking smart. That's why I am on it. And I know you don't wanna hear from them, but this is an enormous amount of money that you're gonna be doing on a certificate of obligation. You need to let the people vote on this. This should have been done by the people.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Craig Altshuler, dumb taxpayer and dumb tax collector on behalf of Potter County and the city of Amarillo. I'm an old dumb county commissioner, so we do things in Randall County. When we built a jail, we actually allowed the voters to vote on it. And when we did that, what we did is we put the admin building in Randall County with the jail. And we saved the county millions of dollars. Matter of fact, Randall County at the time, and still to this day, makes well over $1 million a year on contracts with the state and the feds on bringing in housing inmates while they're in transport. I think this plan, I definitely know that Potter County has lots of needs, no doubt about it. Sheriff's Office has lots of problems. What I see there being two problems. Number one, this is a poor plan. Number two, you're circumventing the voters, me. I have a right to vote on that, Mr. Church, you're my commissioner. I have a right to vote on how you spend my money, frankly. I don't have the right to vote on my money, but I guess.
He's not your commissioner.
Yeah, he sure is.
Yeah, I know where you live. You're in precinct 1, excuse me.
It doesn't matter.
Okay, it doesn't matter, because we do have a right to vote. And, because I guess what it boils down to is we did have public meetings, but the public was not let known about any of these plans because y'all did all these in the dark at night and with your own little committee and so forth. No, this is my 2 minutes.
Your 2 minutes is up.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. Thank you for listening to the voters for once. I mean, you did listen to them.
Judge Tanner, members of the commission, my name is Robert Goodrich.
Good morning, Mr. Goodrich.
I do not live in Potter County, but by heaven, I'm a taxpayer in Potter County. And a fairly substantial one, and I'm very concerned about the process that you're following to encumber our county for the purposes that you are proposing to encumber the county. Who's gonna dispute the need for facilities? We all need facilities. Every county, I'm sure, needs facilities. But there's a way to go about addressing these needs with the public, not without the public having a chance to vote on it. This is a substantial undertaking. Yeah, you have meetings, but listen, you're holding meetings at 10 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning, and most working people are working.
We had one in the evening just for the public.
And you may have had one, but I'm not so certain it was at a time when a lot of people were available to attend. I couldn't have attended. So my concern is that you give the citizens a fair chance. Just because you had one meeting doesn't mean that's adequate for everybody. Maybe you need to have 2 or 3. This is a big deal, and it's gonna encumber taxpayers that's substantial. So my concern is you allow people to vote on this. You don't issue certificates of obligation. I think that's problematic at best. I'm troubled by that. If you want me to be a taxpayer and a happy taxpayer, let me vote on this project and let me vote to encumber myself. I don't want you doing it for me. I'm capable of expressing my own opinion. I will do it at the ballot box, and I'll be faithful to do that. Okay. Thanks for hearing.
Thank you, sir.
And I trust you won't just close the door on this situation and say, well, we have all the hearing we're gonna have, and this is the end of it, so we're gonna decide to go forward. Please, give some careful consideration to what taxpayers are having to say to you. This is a serious business, and it's not one to be treated casually. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the sake of just all including judge, you might want to just summarize the committee that was selected on all sectors of the county and the process that they went through.
See, one of our faithful citizens here, Craig Davis is here. We had a committee made up. This has not been taken lightly. We had a feasibility study done 5 years ago. It sat on the table for 5 years. It was a good feasibility study. We decided to go first with the sheriff's admin. We have a citizens committee made up of every precinct in this county, and they all attended. and that we're all in favor of what we are doing. Craig, do you have anything you want to add to anything today?
Sure.
This is Craig Davis, he is on our Citizens Committee.
My name is Craig Davis. I'm a member of the committee, the advisory committee. There were 4 citizen members appointed or asked, each from each precinct, so there was a total of 5. And we were all unanimously in favor of what we're going for. We can do nothing, which that won't solve the needs of the county. You can sit there and rehab and remodel current building, which is functionally obsolete. And it's gonna cost not as much as a new administration building, but close to those figures. Or you can go ahead and we've made projections into the future to what the needs of the county will be. And they're pretty conservative projections. And based on those projections, what we brought to the commission is what we're proposing to do now. And you can either sit there and do nothing, you can remodel the existing building, which won't meet future needs and will cost quite a bit of money, or you can do something that will take us well into the future. And that's what we were looking at, so. Thank you, Ms. Becky.
Judge, one thing I would add, just to be mindful that this advisory representation did not get added until 2015. So I personally was advocating for the citizen representation at the very start of strategic planning many years ago, 4+ years ago. And because of leadership at the time, that did not happen to pull in the citizens at the very beginning of those conversations. So in 2015 is really when they got added to the committee. But in full fairness, there were lots of iterations and schematic designs and we soft numbers. So I mean, I just say all that to say it's a very different conversation when citizens are there at the beginning and to really be able to create some of that. And would echo your comments about the need. That's absolutely, I don't feel like that's the disagreement.
You were on the committee.
Yeah, I know,
Yes.
but that's what I'm saying. The citizens didn't get invited to the table until 2015, and I know that was something that you really wanted to.
I too was advocating for
Yes.
that, but we also have to remember that we were sort of handcuffed by our home because of the makeup of the court at that time. So we were sort of strained from doing that process at that time.
I can remember us discussing that here in court early on, and I pushed it as well, but this court decided not to do it. And I don't know who, you'd have to go back into and look at the vote. But I do want to say that, and I'm glad it came out, that I think it's important for everyone here to know that Commissioner Murguia was chair of that committee for 2 years. She was involved with the planning. She knew about these decisions and could have done the recommendations that she's proposing now.
They were vetted, and honestly, that is where the 1.6 million or what we've spent with architects is. There were several iterations of that, Commissioner Church, and so when I'm speaking, I'm absolutely speaking from that historical depth of knowledge. And I'm looking at Larry and Mike because we have been through these rounds, and what I am sharing today is not anything that I didn't share 4 years ago. And I think they would nod their head to that.
Okay, any other discussion?
May I speak again? I'll be brief.
Hang on just 1 second. I believe Alan Feingold wanted to speak. Let's let him speak first because he. Are you gonna add anything new, Robert? Alan, please tell us your name and your address.
Alan Feingold, 2601 North Grand Street. I'm not going to try to address the issue of whether certificates of obligation should be used or whether bonds should have been used and voted upon. I do think that the Sheriff's Department needed a new building. The question in my mind is simply whether or not the $21 million plus whatever interest will be paid should be expended solely on that building. If it is expended solely on that building, what should it include? I think the public might have been more responsive to this proposition, or there might have been less opposition to it the public had some idea of what that building will include. I, for example, think that Potter County should have had a forensics lab. I think that the entire city should have had a forensics lab many, many years ago. And I do hope that if this building is built, part of it will be dedicated for that purpose. There are also questions, of course, about storage of evidence, which is a critical part of the sheriff's department, and how much of that will occupy certain kinds of floor space. That, of course, depends on a shelving system, which is perhaps separate from the building itself, but will have a bearing on the use of floor space. I think there also should be a visitor section where individuals can be taken from the jail and be able to visit with their relatives and/or attorneys right in this new facility that the sheriff's office can maintain. I think that there are numerous things that could be put in such a building, but that will be ultimately up to the sheriff. If the commission will advise the sheriff's department as to whether it should have certain facilities in that building, then I think the sheriff could negotiate with the commission and say, yes, we will have something like a forensics lab, or yes, we will have a place where visitation can occur. If this is done, I do think you'll get your money's worth, but if it is not done, you may end up with a building that is, shall I say, far in excess of what you actually do require. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Goodrich, one more time.
Thank you for your kindness, Judge Tanner. Commissioners, one final idea that has not been given very much consideration, and that is a collaborative undertaking with perhaps an adjoining county and certainly with the city of Amarillo. The things that the county does are significant, there's no doubt, but must they be done in isolation from or separate from the very same kinds of services provided through the city or through adjoining counties? We have an opportunity perhaps to really do something dramatically different and beautiful and perhaps create an enormous economy of scale, if you will, if you were able to collaborate with other counties or other cities that are providing similar services to what you're proposing to do. I don't know how to do that. I'm just a very common lay guy. I don't have any big heavy duty financial background. I flunked the 3rd grade, so you can't think that I'm a real smart guy. I'm not. But I am a concerned citizen, and I think most citizens have a strong interest in what the county does. They may not always be able to respond immediately when you all want to hold a meeting. And that's just the way life is. It just shows up that way. That doesn't mean they're indifferent or don't care. But when you have an opportunity to do something collaboratively, I think you would have a great deal of interest, public interest, and a great deal of affirmation in what you're about to do. If you demonstrate you've gone to every extent to find the very best way, the least costly way to accomplish what we need to do as a county. So I appreciate your giving those matters some consideration before you formally act and close the door. Thank you again.
Your time is up. Thank you. Just to be straight, we have done all of what you just said, Mr. Goodrich. We just didn't come up with an idea. We planned it out. Okay. No, any more comment? Anybody at all? Okay, so we need to make a motion. Number 7. I'll make a motion that we consider the bonds that were issued, or the certificates of obligation, sorry, that were issued at 11 o'clock and accept them, and authorize an order to issue the certificates of obligation today, today's date.
We need to add the Hutchison, Shackley that now you've announced.
Yes,
That,
yes, Judge.
Yeah,
We should include them as the way
They were
they're.
awarded to Hutchison Shockey
Yes,
out of Chicago.
yes.
Okay.
And the rate being 28,
2.86%.
But adjusted to 2.843.
Okay, have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
A motion and a second, all in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed. Thank you. I think we have done everything, so the last thing that we'll talk about is that tonight at 5:30, we have an additional meeting to discuss the stadium. If there's nothing else right now, we are adjourned.